All right, I'm sure we might have a few stragglers coming in, but let's go ahead and get this thing started. This will be my last reminder, though I will, no, probably not. I'll probably tell you guys again, please feel free to download the handouts. And of course, as you go through this, please enter any questions you've got. We've got staff in the background that'll be looking at those questions. We'll try to answer all those questions as we can. And we will have a question and answer session at the very end of this. But without any further ado, let me go ahead and get this thing started. I'm Justin Kramer, co-founder of ProShip and head of sales and marketing. I have been doing this for over 19 years. I've been lucky enough to work on shipping systems across over 4 continents and shipping systems that execute more than 2 million packages in a day. My guest today is Mark. Mark, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Justin. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Mark Taylor. I'm the manager of parcel consulting at Invista. I've been in the industry for about 20 years, starting as a hub industrial engineer at FedEx and having various roles there for about a decade. Then I was with Lowe's Home Improvement as a senior analyst for their parcel program for a number of years. And now with Invista, I've been here about 7 years, helping clients each day with RFP projects, negotiating with FedEx and UPS, as well as parcel analytics and general industry analysis.
Excellent. Hopefully everybody can see we've got a lot of experience on this call today to try to help us work through things. So we're going to look at things such as the current landscape. You know, where are we right now? It's in the middle of the pandemic. Peak season is upon us. What are we seeing in the market right now? I think everybody's curious as to what everybody else is doing. We're going to actually dive down into various national and regional carriers and talk about some of those surcharges. And of course, the big issue of this year is those volume caps along with those surcharges. And then of course, we want to look ahead to 2021 and beyond. And I keep mentioning, we're gonna try to provide you guys with an opportunity to ask your questions. Don't feel you have to wait until the end of the webinar to answer those questions. Enter them now so Taylor can start processing them. All right, with that, let's go ahead and really get into it. Starting with, where are we now? Okay, so as we look at it now, nobody will be shocked at this. Everybody expects that there's gonna be a lot of increased volume, and there has been continuously. UPS and FedEx up by 20%, United States Post Office over 50%, and of course, consumer habits have changed, okay? And we expect this to continue. So Mark, I know that the carriers are responding to this. I know when we talked earlier, we talked about some what the carriers can do with their networks at this point in time. Can you give us a little insight from your point of view and from your past experience as what some of the carriers are doing right now for to try to cope with this unprecedented level of volume that we've seen all year?
Sure. So when we look at some of these numbers, one of the really important ones is that 20% number that Justin has in the top left-hand corner. That 20% number basically represents about 4 years of normal growth in the parcel industry. Typically, FedEx and UPS are posting results that are 4 and 5% year-over-year growth. And as a result of that, they also have the capital plans, expansions, and capacity increases that are planned on their basis of year-over-year growth. So when we have something like this pandemic, that is a 20% year-over-year growth, we're now managing the demands of 4 years in the future of a typical growth on today's capacity. So what these two carriers are doing in the short term is they are adding a lot of bodies to the mix. And that is basically the short-term fix from March forward. They've been adding drivers, they've been adding what would normally be seasonal temporary employees. But for the long-term plans, they're going to have to accelerate some of their capacity projects, which would include hub expansions, additional terminals, and the like. Just how much they're going to do that and just how much they're going to accelerate that is yet to be seen. So what that means is now there's a lot of demand on a little capacity.
Yeah, on very little capacity increase the year over year. So can you talk to us a little about synthetic density?
Sure. So synthetic density sounds like just kind of a garbage term, but it's what FedEx started the initiative of really at the end of 2019 into 2020. What synthetic density is trying to combine the deliveries of several different services, express, ground, and SmartPost, all into consolidated deliveries that are more dense and less frequent than they would be if they're all three delivered by different couriers. So FedEx started that initiative back in 2019 and has continued to do that on top of facing the pandemic. So they've had organizational change and this pandemic on top of it. So very challenging year for FedEx.
So what you're saying is right now I only see one UPS truck that comes to my house each day. In the past, I could see an express truck, I could see a ground truck, and I could see a home delivery truck from FedEx. And it sounds like FedEx is trying to get away from that.
Yes, they are. So they do have to maintain some separation because they are legally different than UPS due to when they were first founded, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are trying to combine into as few of delivery stops as they can.
And of course, that will help deliver more packages to an individual neighborhood at once, free up drivers to add additional routes. I can see that being very, very helpful. And it's a good thing they started that before this all came down. Hopefully that's been able to help them maintain a little bit of volume. But with that volume, with what we're seeing from COVID right now, of course, there's some concerns. And I think a lot of our listeners today will actually be seeing the same concerns. Concerns about late delivery, slow deliveries. And of course, that's only compounded without some means of those customers tracking those options. And of course, as we all know, especially with all these extra surcharges, some of which we'll talk about today, shipping costs have gotten more expensive than ever. Okay. Mark, do you have any thoughts on this? Is Invista seeing anything in this area to help combat it, or is this do we just have to, as a group of people, as logistics experts, do we just have to expect that it's supply and demand, and the demand is high, prices are going to go up?
Well, there is a certain amount of acceptance of this situation that all of us have to do because, unfortunately, we have pretty much a duopoly in the United States. We have FedEx or we have UPS. And what we can do, though, is we can be smart about what the performance is looking like and perhaps adding additional days of expected transit into our systems and into our expectations of delivery so that it makes it more likely that the deliveries will be delivered according to customer expectation. So that might include changing some of our customer commits on our websites. Instead of 2 to 3 days, we may need to change that to 4 to 5. I believe that it really does hold true for the last decade that people would rather have their packages more quickly, but if they can't have them more quickly, they at least need to have a committed date that they can depend on.
Yeah, we call that managing expectations, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the webinar today. But let's go ahead and jump right into the bulk of this, because of course this is where people are going to start taking screenshots. They're going to start scribbling down notes furiously. What is changing this peak season? Some of these are already in effect. So as we can see with UPS here, they have a lot of peak season surcharges already in effect right now. There's a pandemic surcharge on all ground residential. That means UPS ground as well as UPS SurePost packages of 30 cents a package. That's going to continue until November 14th. But then come November 15th, all the residential focused surcharges we have on the other side of the page here are going to kick into play. There is large package handling fees that just expired on October 3rd. However, those have been replaced by significantly larger fees. So if you are shipping large packages, please look at the PDF from the United States Post or from UPS. They're very clear as to how those have changed. If you are an international shipper, you are already seeing to China, Hong Kong, and selected APAC origins, you're already seeing 11 cents a pound or 34 cents a pound increase on those. So all of these things, and that will go through until further notice, right? That's basically just a permanent fee. And of course, the painful part is as we look at what's going to take place 10 days from now, that is your volume from February. So the last month before the pandemic, your volume, your average weekly volume of them will be used to determine what band you're sitting in with one of 4 different service levels. Service level 1 is next day air. Service level 2 is, next day air residential deliveries. Service level 2 is all other air deliveries to residential. Service level 3 is ground. Service level 4 is SurePost. Now we kind of lump these in here, so this is less of an eye chart, but think about those as actually 4 different service levels, which means you could be at a 300% SurePost while you're only at a 200% next day air. So you need to be very clear as to where you sit with this. Okay, so this is probably one of the most complicated schemes we've seen from the carrier to date, but it should be in your carrier components to allow all of that to happen. So lots of changes, lots of details associated with that. Okay, Mark, did you want to add anything to this? Is Invista doing anything unique for these, advising their customers differently based off of this?
Well, as you can imagine, we've fielded a lot of questions for our shippers regarding mitigation of these different peak surcharges. So really that comes down to a customized answer for how it's going to affect you.
So you really want to, if you're dealing with this, you really want to talk to an expert in order to figure out how best to deal with the situation that your company is in.
Absolutely. The other thing I would add, Justin, is that when we see these surcharges that are based on a percentage of growth from the February timeframe, know that this is a very new surcharge, and that we're actually going to, as experts, we're actually going to have to experience this for the first time this year and evaluate and zero in on helpful strategies because this is so new.
You know, that's a great point, Mark. I think what I want to say about that is that's why it's good to work with companies who are helping their customers experience this as we speak. So you can't, in this case, that coverage, that ability to say, yes, we have seen this already this year, is something that especially our 2 mutual companies have in common, but something where, you know, this might be one of those areas where the smaller players are just not able to experience as much as those of us who are the larger players in the market. Moving along here, though, let's look at FedEx, right? This is the next big player in the market. They have temporary charges that just ended. Just like, and you're going to see a trend here with anything that's postal last mile, of somewhere between a 30 and a 50% charge on every single one of those. Again, you're seeing oversized charges. Why? Because, you know, the more they can fit on those planes, the better. So they're going to charge you extra for anything that is going to take up a lot of space and not be able to fit in those rollaboard containers that they've got really easily. More residential delivery charges. just you know, this is where most of our customers are going to be, and this is where, quite frankly, the carriers are hitting us the most, at least in the U.S. Okay, and of course, we just see with the changes with the United States Post Office, we are seeing a lot of variable changes in the surcharges associated with this. And when we look at this one here, we'll notice that it's very time boxed, right? One box between November 2nd and the 29th, a more expensive box between November 30th and December 6th, and then a slightly less expensive box between December 7th through January 17th, which is probably going to be all the catch-up shipping. Okay, though some good news, if you are a smaller shipper, which does not apply to too many ProShip customers, but may apply to some Invista customers, if you are shipping less than 35,000 packages a week, some of these charges may not apply to you. Okay, there are other triggers. Please make sure you read the details. Okay, but of course the volume charges are usually reserved for just people shipping greater than a particular volume. Okay, and you can see, just like with UPS, there's a particular set of zones. Unlike UPS, they have a 500% and over zone, so they are expecting people to be able to ship a lot. But please note, do not exceed your capacity if at all possible. I've seen a lot of customers have trailers left at the docks already, and we have even seen customers who the carriers have said that their insistence upon continuing to go over their peak capacity have used that as a breach of contract and have terminated their contract with the shipper. So be very careful when it comes to exceeding your capacity constraints. It's more than just fines nowadays. The carriers will have been seen to terminate the less lucrative contracts in a way to reshuffle their remaining capacity. Mark, any thoughts on that?
I think, Justin, that you hit all of the highlights. One of the things that I would just kind of reiterate for both UPS and FedEx, when we see something like a peak oversized charge, keep in mind that that is an additive charge on top of the regular surcharges. So if you have an oversized charge that is a peak oversized charge, that's in addition to the regular oversize that you would experience. So in some cases, that makes that fee twice as expensive.
Yeah, so this is where make sure you have your software updated. If you've got a good piece of shipping software, you should be seeing all of these charges roll up into the total. Now, as Mark alluded to, these charges are going to be way larger than you would have seen in January or February of this year. But if they're not accurate, you want to ensure that you're shipping with the most accurate rates so that you know what your logistics spend is going to be, you know what your cost is going to be, and you know what your options could be. Because maybe it's time to start moving some things LTL. Maybe it's time to start repackaging some things. Moving on to the next major, that would be the United States Post Office. And this is the first year that they have peak season surcharges. Okay, no pandemic charges, but they are having peak season surcharges. And I'm not hearing too much about caps when it comes to the United States Post Office. Mark, are you hearing any capacity limitations from them?
No, I haven't heard capacity limitations from the post office per se. However, they do have some of the same issues with on-time delivery.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, they may be able to pick up your packages, but don't necessarily expect the on-time service to be measurably better from FedEx and UPS.
Agreed. And well, let's face it, a lot of those FedEx and UPS packages are going to go into the postal network for final mile delivery too, only making that problem larger. Now, we've talked a lot about the bad news. Some good news here, DHL e-commerce, no new surcharges declared. So again, this is one of those great reasons to make sure you've got plenty of different carrier options. since you can not only move volume around, but you can also take advantage where that volume is not going to have additional peak season surcharges associated with it. Of course, with the majors, we also want to look at the regionals. Now, we picked 6 of the larger regionals in the US, and only half of them are actually adding peak season surcharges. That would be Lasership on the East Coast, OnTrack and GLS on the West Coast. If you're in the Midwest using Speedy, if you are in Texas using LSO, or if you're in the Northeast using PCF, there should be no additional charges this year that we are aware of. But let's look at some of them here. Let's look at Lasership. Again, this is quite the expansion of a regional carrier. As you can see here, they cover a very large amount of everything east of the Mississippi. But of course, they are also adding $1, $2, or $3 peak season surcharges. And I will also say, I was just on a podcast with Lasership yesterday. They are not accepting new customers until January. So if you're looking to offload capacity, many of the regionals, as far as I know, all of the regionals have stopped adding additional capacity at this point in time. Mark, any thoughts on Lasership in particular, or just the regionals?
Lasership, I definitely have seen what you were just speaking about play out in our current RFP projects. So several bids sought to get some Lasership pricing, and Lasership has remarked on each of them that they would not like to entertain any new volume until January 2021. With that said, Lasership is adding capacity. So they recently added a new Raleigh-Durham facility. They are trying to keep up with some of the increase in demand. And I do think that they will be a good alternative. But yeah, to your point, not until 2021.
Exactly. All right, so let's switch to the other coast. Let's look at the West Coast. Let's look at OnTrack. And again, at the top there, you can see the areas serviced. You can see that they do have a lot of peak season charges this year with a range of effective dates. So if you are an OnTrack customer, take a screenshot here, watch this on repeat on YouTube, get these dates down because they vary. Again, if you've got good software, these things should just be taken care of in the background. But one way or another, please make sure you're in contact with your logistics software provider to ensure you're getting all of these in place. While we're on the West Coast, I'm going to jump over to GLS. Many of you might know them as Golden State Overnight, or GSO. They were purchased by GLS and have been rebranded. We are expecting to see a lot more competition on the West Coast because of this. In this case, they only have a small amount of items that they're adding here, just that 49 cents per parcel shipment to residential or low commercial density areas. And however, you'll note this one should already be in effect for you and will be in effect all the way through the gift card return period after Christmas. Okay, and let's hit the last one real quick here, and then we'll sum up some of these. But LSO, Speedy, PCF, you can see where their ranges are. Again, kind of a little bit of good news here. If you already have these carriers in your mix, it doesn't seem like they're adding any new surcharges here. That being said, we have not heard of any customers able to add capacity from these carriers since probably late September, early August. Mark, are you experiencing the same thing with the regionals?
Yes. Now, we have received from PCF, we have received some active bids this fall, but a lot of these carriers are the same way, that they may entertain pricing and they may speak to you about a future startup, but not a lot of them are going to take on any measurable additional volume until after the first of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's look at some other things. What can we do besides, especially with these surcharges and capacity constraints? Well, and we're going to talk about each of these. You know, having good multi-carrier shipping software, real-time rate shopping with capacity logic, as many origins as you can have, thereby reducing the length of those legs, reducing the amount of time that a package is taking up space in a carrier's network, the better. You want to have good software updates, and you want to manage customers' expectation. And Mark, I think you've been kind of alluding to that this whole time, and we'll have a whole slide on that one. But let's move into multi-carrier. So already today, we've talked about 4 national carriers, 6 major regionals. What I will tell you is that I've seen micro regionals popping up all over the place. We are expecting to see maybe even more because, Mark, are you expecting to see a massive decrease in volume next year? Is that what Invista or your customers are seeing?
No. In terms of overall demand, many of us think that a lot of the pickup from this year will remain. And
yeah. We're actually expecting not to see a major drop off in January and February, which was usually the breathing time that we all had in the warehouses, that we all had in being able to start planning. So we may all as a group, we may have to prepare to change things out under load, so to speak. Mark, you seeing the same thing?
yes, I believe so. I mean, really, the pandemic has accelerated some changes that were already taking place in the market prior to the pandemic. And what I mean by that is when we look at Amazon, you know, Amazon was growing at a rate that everyone else was envious of and offering customer service that everyone else was envious of as well. And as we've gone through the pandemic, Amazon has continued to grow and continued to build out their parcel network. Another change that was happening is online behaviors. Online retail was gaining as a percentage of the overall retail industry, even in the fall of 2019. And then the pandemic completely accelerated that change. Yeah. So in a lot of ways, I feel as though coronavirus has been an accelerant to a paradigm shift that was starting to take place, and it just really facilitated it going even faster.
Well, let's be frank with ourselves here, right? This forced a lot of the boomers and the resistant Gen Xers to make their first online purchases, got them over that initial hump, and many of them have made significantly more purchases since then. And once you get over that, once you get through that barrier to entry, that customer is much more likely to do it again and do it again. So I'm with you. We do believe that there might be a bit of retraction, but we're not going to go back to 2019 levels. That we may retract back from 2020 levels a little bit.
Well, really, some of the retailers during 2020 that faced different restrictions in their states and brick and mortar locations are unfortunately not going to be the same. You know, Macy's, Nordstrom, so many of these that were kind of on the bubble actually became bankrupt, lost leasing privileges, etc. There was a lot of change to brick and mortar retail this year that I think is going to be permanent.
You know, you make a good point here, because one of the things that we're actually looking at with a lot of you know, how do you deal with this now? And hopefully many of you put these things in place. But if you haven't, here's some changes you should probably be looking at going forward. You know, what is your carrier depth? Are you utilizing all of the different carrier components? Do you have the depth in your software to actually bring up all the surcharges that we just spent 30 minutes talking about? Can all of this occur sub-second? Do you have the flexibility to add and remove capacity such that you're sorting things out? I'm just going to roll right into the next one and talk about something that I think really applies to what we're just talking about is, do you have the ability to ship from all of your origin points? Really important, because as we talk about that capacity, as we talk about those surcharges, as we talk about, as I mentioned earlier, having packages spend as little time in the carrier's network as possible is really important. And so the closer we can get to a customer, whether that's the distribution center, whether that's using a 3PL, whether it's going straight to our manufacturers, or whether it's shipping from store. And in many of our customers' cases, shipping from store does make the shortest leg possible, meaning that you can have a little bit more capacity because you don't have packages that are in that network for 3, 4, or 5 days because of the slowdowns. If we can get a package in and out of that network, we're more likely to be able to put more packages into that network right now. So if you have omni-channel shipping capabilities during this peak season, use it. Okay, absolutely the most important thing, that you use that multi-origin shipping capability in order to provide the most flexibility to yourself. Also, Mark, I know when we were talking earlier in the week, we were talking about the fact that your stores, if stores are being placed in areas where lockdowns are occurring, if you have the appropriate external access, and this varies by locality, okay, but a lot of our customers have reclassified their stores that are in lockdown areas as dark stores, basically meaning as a warehouse sitting in a retail park or on the edge of a mall or something of that nature. Mark, did you have anything to add to that? Because this is a really powerful thing that we're seeing, especially with flexible solutions.
I think honestly, that's the best term that we could possibly use: flexibility. Being able to have different means and modes of getting your goods to the recipients. And one of those, ship from store, is a great option. A lot of advantages there, especially because it decreases the parcel pricing zone, getting closer to recipients. It reduces the time in the parcel network, which typically will decrease damage and where's my stuff calls, and can be used as a supplement, as you're talking about, Justin, in giving that store the ability to stay operational and employ and use inventory that's already been placed. So there are a lot of good things about the ship from store model. The only caution there would be that you can get hit with additional pickup charges if you're not careful. When you go from, a big consolidated national DC to 1,200 stores. So you do have to manage the pickup cost very carefully. But otherwise, it's honestly one of the better solutions to decreasing the time in the parcel networks.
And I'll tell you, one of the things that I've noticed in the last 2 years is we may think that everybody has ship from store down, but I will tell you the majority of retailers out there are not shipping from store. They're just now getting BOPIS or curbside pickup in place, and in some cases that's not a fully integrated solution. So if you are looking at next year, if you are one that does not have fully integrated BOPIS, you don't have fully integrated ship from store, that's one of the major improvements you can make to your logistics tech stack in order to ease the movement of goods from one place to another, in order to react to these rolling lockdowns, to be able to take advantage of areas that will allow you to turn stores into dark stores, and will allow you to do curbside pickup at a certain point in time. Flexibility is the key. And a lot of that flexibility is going to come from the way the software actually updates. You should be looking for as much of your enterprise software stack to automatically update and pull down list surcharges and fees. You want updates that occur with minimal to no downtime, okay? And if at all possible, you want many of those updates to occur in an automated fashion, so you're not having to spend IT resources actually updating those. Now that's something you got to get to trust your vendor on, but it's definitely a nice feature, even if you only use it the 8 months outside of peak season. It definitely helps to make sure everything gets rated properly. Now, I'm going to come back to something that we have been alluding to on and off this entire time, and that is managing expectations. You know what, as we saw from 2012 to 2019, customers wanted it faster and freer, right? Mark, you were talking about that. But right now, customers are a little more concerned about when am I actually going to get this? That management of that customer expectation is vital, okay? It was becoming more and more vital, especially as people were trying to deal with, the 2-day guarantee from Amazon. And when Amazon and Walmart both went to a single day guarantee for most of the country, all of a sudden it became even more important. Because if you can't get it out there in 1 day for free, at least you need to set your customers' expectation to know. And right now, we actually have two problems. Not only do we have the traditional problem of, can I afford as a shipper to send it something that will get it there next day, but also, can I actually even fulfill this package in a certain amount of time? And what consumers have been responding really well to is very open communication, letting them know, I've got a 5-day fulfillment time, or if you order this by such and such, we'll go ahead and get it to you by Friday, okay? Or, if you use our free shipping, which has a minimum, you'll get it within this time zone. So again, it's all about managing those customer expectations. And Mark, I know we kept touching on this. I'm sure you got plenty to add here.
There have been several initiatives by different retailers to try and shape demand. And when I'm referring to that, primarily that is trying to shift the demand to earlier and sort of flatten out the demand instead of having the huge spike right at Black Friday or from the end of Thanksgiving to Christmas, which is typically the biggest part of the peak. So, Amazon is an example where they had their Prime Day in hopes of shifting some of that demand to earlier. But there have been several successful initiatives of trying to do some of those events to get holiday shopping done prior to the holiday. Honestly, just on a personal note, I've been urging family and friends to do their Christmas shopping before Halloween this year because we know that in November and December, as we go forward, it gets increasingly tighter.
Yeah.
So,
and I know that a lot of logistics folks don't really have a whole lot of influence against their marketing team, but if their marketing team does not consider themselves already to be in peak, I would recommend changing their mind. As far as a lot of our customers are concerned, peak started the week of October the 12th, and so we are well into the first month of peak already for many of our customers, and I think that's a good thought process to have. All right, so we're running a little short on time here, so we're going to move a little faster, but we've been alluding to a lot of expectations for 2021 as well. Again, we've talked about the fact that we don't expect to see volume go down very much. There will be a marginal incremental increase in carrier capacity, but that means that in 2021, you want to make sure you get those carriers added to your mix, right? You can't ship anything over to Lasership or to OnTrack or to anybody else if they're not part of your logistics software suite. One of the big things we were talking about is, hey, volume's gone up all this year, and as you can see from our graphic, you're probably not going to get a big dip in January, February, and March like you used to, and there's not going to be that second quarter lull where software can be installed. You need to be prepared to work with companies that are used to installing software under load, providing secondary systems, providing their rollback capabilities, all those other things, right? And then finally, are you using everything you can? Are you leveraging things like dark stores? Are you shipping from your stores yet? So you can even turn them into dark stores. Are you looking at shipping from your manufacturers, especially if they're closer to the customer base? Do you have 3PLs that are dotted around the country just in case one area goes into lockdown and others don't? And of course, do you have that carrier mix? Mark, did you want to add anything to this? I know we talked about probably all of these items earlier in the conversation.
No, I think what I'll do is save some of the comments about 2021 through the Q&A session.
Perfect, perfect. Well, let's go ahead and Mark, I know we've been talking about Invista, but let's give you a minute or two here to actually tell our listeners, what does Invista do and why might they want to look at Invista?
Sure. So very quick commercial here for Invista. I personally work in the transportation practice of Invista, where we do carrier sourcing, business intelligence, TMS selection, and a lot of other consulting activities. But Invista is a supply chain solutions firm, and they're able to really consult on any of these areas that you see on the screen. So looking at network strategy, which is something that Justin's been talking about, and system selection for WMS, LMS, OMS. So really anything dealing with the supply chain and making that as efficient and as innovative as possible, Invista is involved with those solutions.
Excellent. And many of our listeners already know who ProShip is. We are multi-carrier shipping software. So once you've worked with a firm like Invista to determine how you want to make changes, when you need to connect your OMS to a shipping software for rating, when you need to connect your point of sale so that you can enable ship from store, when you need to take your warehouses to the next level, think about ProShip as a shipment execution piece. Excellent. All right. We've got 15 minutes left to go through Q&A, and we have got a lot of questions. Please know folks, that if you still have questions, feel free to continue to add them. We may have to respond to them via email, but with this, let's go ahead and I'll start reading off some of the questions that we got. Starting with the first one. Is it true what we are hearing that UPS and FedEx reps, that their capacity is so tight, is not a good time to negotiate a new contract? They said that what we have now could also be lessened or reduced. Better time would be to wait to the middle of next year. Question. So Mark, do you want to respond to that one?
Yes.
About negotiating new contracts and because of capacity right now?
Yes. So definitely deal with this every day, as my primary role is dealing with parcel sourcing. So I would say that yes, the FedEx reps and the UPS reps are saying the truth here, that it is a very challenging environment right now to negotiate in. That is with an asterisk. And why I say that is there are certain targeted shippers that the carriers are open to talking about. So if you are in pharma and you have a lot of air volume, if you ship primarily to commercial recipients, some of those things are definitely worth still negotiating and talking about. But in general, if you are an e-commerce retailer that ships predominantly to residential addresses, it is a very challenging time to negotiate. And yes, I would wait until 2021 to take up a full RFP project.
And a follow-on that one, given the rate increase that's coming next year, which surcharges do you think will be the hardest ones to negotiate reductions on? Or do we have any data on that?
Yes, we do. So both FedEx and UPS have now announced their general rate increases, along with some of the surcharge information. I still think that there's still some surcharge info to come out later, but we have a good picture. And I think the hardest to negotiate surcharges are going to be anything involving residential delivery. If you look at how UPS increased its surcharges for the GRI in the announcement from last week, they've increased the residential surcharge, the delivery area surcharge, and those are part and parcel to shipping to residential addresses. So that's where they're going to try to control cost. And for that reason, I think that those are going to be some of the most difficult charges to negotiate. Second to them are probably anything to do with larger packages. So large package surcharge, additional handling. Residential large packages are the two different areas of pretty high cost for the carriers, and those will be ones that they are much tighter on than others.
All right, moving on. How are shippers to deal with price hikes due to very tight carrier capacity and carriers limiting volume during peak season? Well, I'm going to take a first whack at this and say, really, you needed to have had a lot of things in place already. If you don't plan to put more carriers in place early next year, make sure you've got shipping software that will help actually balance those so that you can make the most of the lowest charges possible. Again, omni-channel fulfillment. If you have not lit up your stores as an origin source, even though there may be a pickup charge for those stores, the pickup charge will probably be greatly offset by the capacity that you can get out of those stores. And the fact that not only can you spread the capacity across the national carriers network, but you can also introduce regional carriers to your mix, thereby dramatically increasing your overall capacity. Mark, did you want to add anything to that one?
Yeah, it's all about measuring daily shipping and being able to react very quickly to high demand spikes. Shifting some of that volume over to an alternative carrier if you have the ability to, and possibly even looking at trying to talk to DHL e-commerce, the US Postal Service, or some of the remaining regionals that actually may have some capacity right now.
Yeah, and I think our answer that we just gave falls into the next question as well, which is, what is the recommended way to mitigate peak season surcharges besides carriers' prescribed methods of shipping slower and raising your prices to customers? The reality is find a way to provide more capacity. Find a way to provide capacity closer to the customers, because that's really that's really the thing. And what that might even include, and what we've seen in some edge cases, is some of our customers are even using couriers from their stores in the more densely populated areas in order to remove all of those deliveries from the major carriers networks.
Well, and something that we haven't spoken about yet is consolidation. And if shippers can consolidate packages that would otherwise be shipped on maybe 3 separate days in 1 week to one box at the end of the week, that is another strategy that you can employ by really trying to consolidate how many packages are sent through the parcel networks.
Excellent. All right. Do you have any strategies or solutions to obtain the money back guarantee on failed services not delivering on time? Mark, I'm going to turn this one over to you, because as far as I know, there are no guarantees right now.
Yeah, gee, thanks, Justin. This is an awesome. No, unfortunately, the answer to that is there aren't a lot of good alternatives. Now, since I negotiate each day, one thing that I would always recommend is, if you are giving up any part of your service or guarantees, that you try to pick up the value of that in another place. So if I would typically get a 5% refund because I have 95% on-time service, what's the value of that transportation, and where can the carrier give me that commensurate value to make up for what I'm losing there? So from a pricing standpoint, there are some avenues there, but to be able to really recognize the MBGs or GSR dollars, unfortunately, no.
And Mark, that I got to tell you, that's something that I've just heard my entire career is don't go after the individual GSRs because the carriers even have ways of billing you for excessive GSR returns. So instead, gather all that information and go after them for the value of the GSRs as a whole, not one individual.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean, let me be plain. I'm a big proponent of the guaranteed service refund because I think it has an accountability factor and holding the carrier accountable for delivering on the service that they say that they offer. But in a time like this where they basically suspended that basic part of their services, then you have to find it somewhere else.
Insightful. All right, moving on. Based upon our experiences, the UPS peak surcharge typically billed as a shipping charge. Correction. Now I'll answer this one. If you've got good shipping software, this should be built in. You should have the ability to adjust your own company's peak season surcharges, and so this should be part of your rate. This should be part of the result. The rate is actually being provided to you from that shipping software.
In invoicing, it would not typically be seen as a shipping charge correction. This would be seen as an accessorial line if you're looking at invoicing data. And one thing there that we didn't mention, Justin, that's a change at UPS during this whole time period is going to the scan-based billing.
Great point.
Where there will be fewer shipping charge corrections, period. So just kind of expanding on that question a bit.
Nice. Well, the next one is again on surcharges. Do we think these surcharges will go back to normal next year? Or will UPS and FedEx continue to have volume-based surcharges? Now, I'm going to kind of alter this question because dim weighting, dimensional charging, based on the volume of a package, that's here to stay, and those dim charges are just those divisors are just going to keep getting smaller and smaller. That's just part of it. But in this case, I assume you're talking about actually volume of shipments. So Mark, do you think we'll continue to see capacity constraints and surcharges based upon a particular level of capacity?
I do. UPS did this to certain shippers even prior to this year. And I think what we're seeing this year is kind of a broader application of what they had already done previously with other shippers.
Excellent. All right, so we are actually getting down to the bottom of the list here. I don't know that we're going to get to all of these. We may have to respond to some of these via email instead. Is there an ROI for us to have ProShip or any other multi-carrier shipping system and add additional carriers to our setup? Are most of your customers already doing so? So again, we've been saying this a lot, but let me just repeat it again. Yes, leverage as many carriers as you can, especially because of these peak capacity restraints, and using a product like ProShip, something which can make a real-time decision, a sub-second decision to say, from this origin, here is the lowest cost solution that still has capacity. So whether that's a regional carrier, whether that's a national carrier, whether that's a ground service or an express service or a postal service, you want all of that to be taken into account sub-second without any operator input. All right. Are packages handed off to UPS the same as Smart Post? So this is from one of our earlier questions. So each carrier has a different way in which they actually do a handoff to the United States Post Office for final mile delivery. And based upon that, some of the fees and surcharges go into that. So that's something that whether it's DHL e-commerce, whether it's UPS SurePost, whether it's FedEx Smart Post, or OnTrack's direct post, each of those is a little bit differently. I recommend you talk with your multi-carrier shipping software expert or your carrier themselves to help determine how each of those are slightly different. Next one, do you see the peak fees that are being levied on large/enterprise shippers along with additional accelerator fees for incremental volume by percent as a way that FedEx and UPS make room for small business clients and higher yielding parcels? That's a loaded question.
The short answer to that is yes. I do see the general strategy of UPS and FedEx is going to be towards higher profitability for the same capacity as they have. And what we've seen is on larger shippers, we're talking $200 million, $400 million shippers, UPS and FedEx have come to them and said that they're no longer going to take 15, 20% of their volume, because what they're going to do is replace that in their networks with small or medium-sized clients to get higher profits. And both FedEx and UPS have made several comments about those on their public-based quarterly review calls. So it's something that they don't have any compunction with claiming, because they are doing that.
Yep. I mean, it's an awesome time for them to make sure their profitability is as high as possible, because, well, they need to build out more networks. All right, we've got 3 questions left. I know many of you may have to drop off at the top of the hour. We're going to push through these last 3 questions, and then anything else we will actually answer via email. Third to last question is, do UPS surcharges apply only to shippers with 25,000 packages per week, or to any shipper that exceeds last February's volume? I'm going to say UPS actually has a PDF out that covers all of that. Some of the charges apply whether you are shipping 1,000 packages a week or 25,000 packages a week. Look at that and please make sure that you understand how that affects you. Also, make sure you can call your UPS rep and get them to clarify. Okay. Second to the last one, how do you feel customers are responding to access point delivery point locations? This is a great question, because we've seen a lot of data. Customers really don't want to leave their house. So some customers, it's fine, but the customers who are working from home, who are only going out to do grocery shopping, things of that nature, they're not happy with access points. However, customers who are, whether they're essential workers, whether they're in an area where more mobility has happened, they're enjoying it. So it really depends upon the destination and the type of customer that you're shipping to. Mark, have you seen anything different with customers' desire for different types of, whether it be access point delivery or delivery to their homes?
100% agree with you. They typically, both carriers, FedEx and UPS, have tried to build out their retail network to basically allow for more access points, and customers just really haven't wanted that. Additionally, kind of interesting tidbit to the GRI for UPS, we noticed that there is a new surcharge for access point deliveries on each package for 2021. So it used to be 0, and then that saved you a residential fee. But in 2021, there will be a $2.99 charge on each access point delivery.
Well, that's really powerful news there. All right, last question. Do you anticipate the residential peaking factor to become a commercial surcharge in 2022 or beyond?
Not at this point. Not at this point. To a certain extent, capacity is capacity, right? Whether it's commercial or residential. But residential is targeted simply because it is the least dense and highest frequency delivery. Commercial deliveries tend to be more dense and less frequent. So I don't necessarily see that being a commercial surcharge, but all things are possible.
Excellent. With that was our last question. Mark, I'd like to thank you for helping us today and being my guest and walking through all these complicated peak season surcharges and, well, let's face it, from all of our questions, what we expect to come in the future as well here. For everybody listening, thank you for listening. Remember, and now is the last chance to pull down those handouts. And of course, you can always reach us at the email addresses that are on the screen right now. And we look forward to talking to all of you in the future. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Justin.